Today we're going to do something on the channel we've not done before. I'm actually just going to make a material from beginning to end in real time. No skips around, get all the way through. It'll take about an hour to get this set up and basically good to go. There's a lot of fun stuff to do with the chainmail. We're going to have a Rust version. We're going to make the non-Rust version. And it's actually, we're going to make a metal, which we've never done on the channel before, which is kind of crazy. We've not hit that before. But the chainmail is a really good opportunity to do some interesting stuff with shape splatters and mixing discrete little flood fills together. There's some cool stuff in here. This will take us, like I said, about an hour to get through. And it just gets it into a point where it's basically good to go, barring a little bit of polish. It also gives us a chance to go through and explore the new renderers that they are added in the new version of Substance Designer. So the new rasterizer, the new path tracer. The GPU path tracer in particular is really great because now we have self-shadowing from the tessellation. So anything displaced is going to actually self-shadow itself, which is really great. Like, I'm really happy with how this turns out. It's really cool. So it'll take us about an hour to get through this. I can explain it, every step of the way as I try to in all the videos. Something we're going to do new with this series where we're going through and doing these kind of one-shot materials in one go. I'm going to make another version of this that's on Patreon, this kind of like the post graph. And this is where I'm going to go in and just spend about another hour to just polish them up a little bit, make some features a little bit more complex, add some things, and just kind of build on what was done in the YouTube video. So if you're interested in that, you can check out the Patreon for this stuff. The stuff we do in the Patreon is mostly just, like I said, polishing up the different layers of the texture. You'll see it update here in a second. Just the new path tracers takes a bit more time to render, but it's definitely worth it. So we just go through and like complicate these, add a bit more detail, talk through how we do that. The fun stuff on here in particular is stuff like this, where I'm going to show you how to take noises and wrap them to the specific UVs of your object. So this is something that'd be very tricky to do without a pixel processor, but we're able to take noises and conform them to the surface of our texture in these really interesting ways. So this would sort of take too long to explain in the YouTube video today, maybe on another day, but on the post game, this is something you can do. But for now, let's hop into the chainmail graph itself and just talk about how to set up the pattern, get kind of the basis of this going before we talk about any of the complicated stuff. Jumping in and look at this. Right away, we're greeted new version. Stuff's very cool. And I love this stuff that Louise made here for the demo. If you haven't seen her video, you should definitely go watch it. She walks through the new render settings, which are really great. We're going to go in today. I haven't really used them yet, so this is very cool. There's some really nice, fun stuff you can do to set up the way your substance integrates through the archives with like Blender or whatever. We're not going to do that today, but the new renderers are great. Really, really good. We're going to make this 4K. And let's get going on this. So looking at reference, I should pull this up. Ooh, this is very cool. We'll make use of this as we go through. This is great. Looking at a reference, I have a bunch of stuff here. Or I shouldn't say that, not a bunch of stuff. I'm a pretty big believer in not like choking myself out with reference and having way too much stuff early on. I'd rather have less and slowly add it. But this is enough to kind of get the idea of like how the pattern works. And I like this for texture. These kind of buckles are interesting. I think that's kind of cool. And then this is just a really easy way for me to see what's actually happening. The first thing I'll do here is probably just like lay out the pattern and then figure out where I'm going from there. Like something simple, just like a ring. And then we'll slowly add detail on, which is very normal for, if you've ever watched any of my videos, it's sort of how I like to approach things and how everyone basically does. So looking through this, I brought this chainmail reference into Photoshop for a sec, get the boring stuff out of the way. YouTube loves when you lead with the boring stuff. It's really, really good for retention. The thing it's worth doing though, it makes a lot of sense to come in here and just like think about this for a minute, because this is a very confusing thing to look at if you're just looking at the entire image. It's sort of hard to see what's going on. So I'm just going to take a small section of this. Here's another pro tip, and just look at this look at it a small part of it. This becomes easier to see because what you really pick up on, and I've kind of already seen this a minute before we started the video, but really it would be helpful if I had a color here. These chains, I cannot draw a circle. These are all the same. They're all tilted this way, all of them. And then the other rings are the reverse. And they barely even touch. These are just sort of like placed on a grid. And then the other chains do the same thing, but the opposite, and they are offset from the red ones. So instead of trying to do all of those things at once, I'm literally just going to focus on making these red chains, ones that all tilt this way or that way, I guess. And then we'll just, the pattern will sort of build itself. That's sort of a thing that happens a lot when you're making patterns in Designer, is you make little bits of it or pieces where it's a bit simpler to think through, and then it kind of just creates itself. So we're going to start with making a simple ring shape, and this is going to be really quick. We're just going to grab a cone, and I'm going to use a histogram select, and I'm going to use this to actually just make our ring in one click, basically. So I move the position, move the range to get more or less of it. Can put the contrast up to flatten the tops. I want the ring bigger. I want the ring to have less of a fall off there. That's totally fine for now. I'm going to use a shape splatter node to do this instead of the normal tile generators you see me use all the time. The reason for that is just because there's some things later on that'll be very useful for when we texture. And you'll see that when we come to it. So I'm going to plug this in. You'll see these are really dark. That's just because the shape splatter by default has this setting where it's automatically scaling height based on the scale. So you just turn that off for this because it's not really what we need it for. And the other thing we would need to do is create those tilts on those rings. So I'm just going to take a gradient and blend that over top of it. I have so much stuff in here. Gradient linear 1, and I'm just going to multiply that over top. That's totally sufficient for now, at least. Plug these in. Cool. And that's basically it. Then we have to make the other one. I'm going to create a duplicate of this, and we'll tie these together later. And I'm going to transform these like this. I keep getting text. Flip this vertically, so we have the ones that are going the opposite direction. So vert mirror, plug these ones in, and then we're just going to max blend these together. But well, not an issue, but they're right over top of each other right now. We need these ones to be over in the corner here. So to figure out the math for how much we should offset these, there's no global offset on the shape splatter, so we have to do it on a separate transform, which is fine. Let's put this here. What we have to move these over so that they're in the middle of where they currently are. So the way we can do that is just take 1 and divide it by the total number of tiles we have. So we have 16. So if we take 1 and I divide it by 16, I have 0.0625. And if I plug in 0.0625 and minus 0.625, they're in the same place. So really all you need to do is take this and divide it by 2. And this is the number we're actually worried about. And we'll like lock this in later so that if we make adjustments to it, it'll come along for the ride, just so we don't have to do the math every time. But this basically does our pattern. We're kind of done. I'm going to take these. There's some adjustments we're going to make here for sure. But just as a quick test, let's plug this into normal. Ooh, look at this. This is the rasterizer, but we'll switch to the path tracer later. Real interesting. Move these over here. And I'm going to do kind of the classic stuff I do here where I get like an ambient occlusion node and just making a dot there. Just so that we really, it's just nice. This is just, I mean, not really going to be what the base color looks like, but it's just nice to have something to look at while you're working. And sometimes the AO can help just like pop stuff out a bit more. Obviously, there's some intersections and stuff we're going to have to deal with, and that's fine. We also need to make an output for our opacity. So I'm just making an output node and setting the use to opacity. And I'm going to grab, you can grab a histogram scan if you want, or threshold, just to make the alpha so we can make the transparency or the opacity, I guess. So put the position way up. And I'm going to right click on this, view it in 3D in the opacity channel. Cool. A little hard to see on the cube, to be honest. So we'll switch. Oh, how long has this been here? Interesting. I don't remember this being here in the past. Maybe it has, I don't know. And this is new. But this is cool. This is like a perfect thing for this, I guess. So this works well. I mean, there's some intersections. We can deal with that. A couple things. First is it's probably the case that scaling these up will feel bigger. I have 2 shape splatters. So I want to make sure that when I adjust things here, the other sides adjust. So I'm going to go to scale here and expose this. And we'll call this shape scale as a name is actually probably fine. And I'm going to go down to the other one and go to the hamburger menu and use an existing one we already exposed. So now these go blue and we can't control them here, but if we double click anywhere on the empty graph, in our input parameters, we now control it here. And this just allows us to control both of them at once. So I can scale these up. And I mean, we're basically done. So you can see that this is like, it's a really helpful way of working just because the pattern, it sort of built itself. We didn't really have to do a ton here. And it was just able to kind of figure out, it fills itself in. This happens a lot. Like I said, when you're doing like mosaic, we did a big tile pattern recently on the Patreon, where we did this kind of pattern tile floor. And we had to make some complicated-ish patterns on the tiles where there was paint. And it's very similar to this. If you just make one piece and you duplicate it, they'll sort of populate themselves in, which is great. This is interesting. And this is essentially this. I do think on these ones, there's more overlap. Like this piece overlaps the piece next to it more. Not so much vertically, but they definitely tend to overlap more. So what I'm going to do is create more of them in X, or more of them in Y than there are in X. So I'm going to set this to 24. So there's 2/3 here and 1/3 more here, I guess. So there's 50% more in Y than there are in X. So I'm going to go down to the size and make the Y size 50% taller to compensate. And now there's a lot more overlap happening. And I would just need to make both. We can link these together later if we want to, but I'm going to the second one, also making it 24, going to its size and making the Y 50% bigger. And this just creates more overlap and they end up linking together better. And then I'm going to go down into the size, and we probably want to bring this down a bit. Actually, they're a little too big now, but that's kind of perfect. That's really cool. So just a good example of how you can actually like get a lot out of, sometimes complicated patterns aren't that complicated when you just break down the pieces. It just builds itself. I love the new rasterizer. That's great. Should switch to the path tracer later. Let's actually, well, we'll do that later. You know what? No, we'll do it right now. The nice thing about the new GPU path tracer is displaced materials self-shadow, which is really cool. What I might do here is let's turn on the displacement. I know with Luis's video that they moved where the properties for this go. So I believe scale is still here, our height scale. Now we don't even have height plugged in, so we should plug that into our output. It's a little much. And then I know that they moved where the tessellation went. I believe it's in the render settings now. Tessellation factor is now here. There you go. So we probably actually don't need it to be that high, but you can see we're getting more geometry. Well, we probably want a bit more, so we don't have it be so beat up. That's pretty slick, man. I like the path tracer. Getting the height map actually shadowing itself looks pretty sweet right away. That's heat. That's awesome. I like that a lot. This is the first time I really played with this. It's very, very cool. Get the new version of Substance Designer. It seems great. Cool. I'm going to make these, like, we may as well just like make this metal. So I'm going to go to my metal channel, make this white. And we probably, well, that's fine for now. We're going to do a bunch more edits to this in the post game to do all sorts of fun extra stuff. But for now, this is really good. And I love having it on this. A lot of things worked out perfectly here that I didn't know was going to happen. So this is good. What I want to do next is work on making this kind of buckle component. And then we'll get into the actual texturing of it. So we're probably actually gonna make a subgraph for this, but let's just figure it out in the main graph and then we'll duplicate it later. I'm also going to save a copy of this. You should always do this, is make sure that you're saving this off somewhere. So if you crash, you have autosaves. So we're going to create this little bump out. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to get another version of the histogram select and make it bigger. And I'm going to do a bit of a trick here where I get the gradient circular and I'm going to use the histogram select, which is going to grab some arc of that linear gradient. I'm going to lower the range and put the contrast up. And this is going to allow me to take like a pie slice. So if I do this and blend between the small ring and the big ring using the pie slice, we're going to create this little bump out. And I'll set this to max once we do the blending. And I can go into the histogram select and turn the contrast down. And that'll give us an area where they kind of feather out. And I think that'll do fine for actually making the little bumped out section. I don't know if it's going to be someplace we don't see it. Oh no, it's right there. We'll add random rotation, all that fun stuff, but that's neat. We get the little like kind of bumped out section. And then I want to create a crease here so that they looks like that's where they link up. Like there's like a little, because these would be all kind of like closed shut. So I'm looking for making this essentially like an area where the pieces like clasp into each other. So what I'll do here is take a splatter circular. Oh, it got updated. Very cool. Oops. We don't want it there. We'll take him. Might actually just switch to the, well, no, we'll leave that now. That's fine. I'm going to take we'll get the problem is actually fine. I'm just going to make one of them and move the radius out a bit and make this really long and thin. And I'm just going to invert this and multiply it from our shape here. Like this. Like this. Put this here. And I just need to move this, it's sort of the right, but we just need to move it over a bit more. I also want the middle to be more in the middle. So I'm going to go down to the splatter circular that's making this and use the ring rotation just to move it into the place I want it to be. That's fine. Like that. It's a little intense. It's a little thick too. So we can go to the splatter circular and turn its X size down a bit. I also might push the radius out a little bit more. So it's a bit more even. There we go. Make this a bit thinner. And it's a little intense. Like I don't want it to like completely cut it out. So I'm also going to switch back to the old OpenGL one just for now. Because I just don't want the I wonder if they moved this now though. Oh, they just have the original one. I'm just using the original one just for now because I'm worried that it might be interfering with OBS's audio capture. I'll have to test that later. Multiply this down because I don't need it to be that big of a clip. Just a little bit. And then we're going to put that little buckle. There's sort of this little, it must be just like a bead of like solder or something almost. So we're going to make a simple version. Later on in the post game, we'll go make this like more complicated. But for now, we can use a parabola again. I'm just going to make these sizes uniform. So they're not a kind of really gross shape, scale them down. And I'm going to screen this on right here. The only problem is this is pure white right now. So I'm going to take that and bring the white level down. Put a blend here. That's probably too much. And I'm going to screen this little dot right on. And we obviously don't want it right there, so I'll go and play with the radius on its splatter circular and the ring rotation, just to get it in the spot we want. So somewhere over here is fine. I'm gonna put an auto level here just because we've adjusted the gray levels of this so much. I want to make sure that we have a full histogram scan. Then we do this. Cool, and then we have this little buckle. And that adds a lot of, it's a much needed kind of like smaller detail. Like if you have just the rings, it's all kind of small-ish detail, but we don't have anything like really fine to grab onto, which isn't great. So I think this works really well. Again, post-game will make this a lot more complex, but for now, I think this is fine. Looks good. And the overlap's actually working pretty well. I'm quite pleased with how this worked out, actually. So the thing is, they're all in the exact same place, right? They're always to the right here. And we want them to be in different places. We have limited ability to add rotation random to this because the intersections will start getting screwed up. Right, because if I do a bunch of rotation randoms here, the bright, we kind of rely on the bright part being up here and the dark part being down there so that they don't, so they're able to blend over each other properly. If you put a bunch of rotation random on it, we're going to have lots of places where it just breaks. So we can't do that. We probably do a little bit of it, I think, but we can't do a ton. We can probably just do like a tiny bit, like something like this, and probably not hurt us. Let's actually expose this. And expose both, just so that we can touch both at the same time. This seems like we'll probably get away with it, but it's still not that great. Like they're moving, but not enough. So what we're going to do is make this into a subgraph that spits out pre-rotated versions of these. So I'm going to grab all of this, right click on it and create a graph from our selection, and we'll call this link generator. And this guy's job is going to be just to create this shape, but with some random placements. So I'm going to make two outputs. One, which is the original shape, and then another one, which is the mirrored, the vertical one that's transformed 2D. And all we really need to do is spin, because this guy doesn't have the gradient blended on him yet. So we can just spin this one randomly, and the gradient will always be in the same place, but everything else will be spinning underneath it. So we'll get more variation. So I'm going to get a splatter circular, but I'm going to set it to just 1 by 1. So, sorry, one pattern. Radius to 0, so it's right in the middle. Set the pattern to the image input, and the scale in the splatter circular is 10% by default. You just set it back to 1. And now what's cool is as this graph is seeded and we get random, well, we'll go down to the ring rotation random and set it to full. And now when this node is seeded, this will just spin around, which is great. And then we just put this here. And we have a generator here, which is going to just kind of randomly rotate this ring. So we can do it before the blending even happens. And we'll drag this out, and this guy just sort of replaces both of these. There's the vertical one and the mirrored vertical one. And I'm just going to hit Control D to get different versions of this. And we're going to get different seeds. I don't know why I duplicated those all one at a time. I could have just duplicated them in a group. But I'll go over here. And instead of having one pattern input on the shape splatter, I'm going to set this to 8. I didn't know it was 8. I thought it was 6. And we'll do this and plug in all of our top rotated ones. Maybe I did build 8, so that's nice. Did I? Oh, I missed one. Cool. And then we have to randomly seed all these so they get a different rotation value. So you can just click on the link generator and go up to random seed and tap the randomize button. And this way we're going to get a lot more variety out of where that link actually is. If someone's been wearing this for a long time, it would like jostle around, and then we need to hook up the bottom ones as well. So the only difference between the top and the bottom ones is the bottom ones are flipped vertically. Ooh, that is not right. We want to add more pattern numbers. I was plugging it into like scale map and stuff. Do this, do this, do this. Cool. Plug all these in. The nice thing about making this chainmail in here is you'll also be able to use this in like whatever. Like this can go into Painter, or and you can even add like features to paint out different links. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with this. We could change the tiling, I guess, more here, but I just want to grab some more geometry in the shader. Get rid of some of those little jaggies. But now you can see we have the link is much more randomized. It can show up in different places, which feels a lot better. That looks cool. And the intersections are still pretty good. The height seems a little tall, but I think that's fine. Cool. That works really well. So that's basically all I want to do there. We can add some more stuff here potentially. Like we could see if we get away with a bit more random rotation, maybe. I doubt we can use a lot of this before it starts getting pretty screwy. We start getting like gross intersections in the height map, but this isn't awful. Like this seems... Another new thing is they changed the hotkey for moving the sky environment map, and my brain has been exploding for the last 23 minutes as I've been doing this. It's no longer Control Shift and right click, it's just Shift and right click, which is like Painter. So it's good that they're making them all the same, but I spend most of my time in Designer, so my brain is just exploding right now. If you ever see this happen in the viewport, it's because my brain is breaking and I have to fix it. So you see, we're going to get the higher this number, the more we risk kind of weird intersections like that. So I can't use a ton of it like this. That doesn't look very good. So I just got to be careful that this number isn't actually super high, but it's okay because we're getting our rotation random more from that generator we built. The same would be true of the position random. If we wanted the links to not be so perfect, we probably can't make this number so high without breaking stuff. But we could try having a little bit of it. We should have a little bit of it. So I'm going to expose it on the top shape splatter and link them. And this actually seems fine, having a little bit of it. Just so it's not so like perfect. I think that works nice. Pretty good. So we could, this is, I think, good for the height map for now. And like I said, in the post game, we'll do a lot more work on this, but we could probably just begin texturing this. We can delete all of these old guys. So this is our like pattern generation. Put these over here. Like this. And we're going to go in and start texturing these guys up. The other thing I kind of want to do is build they look like they have this kind of like inset, which is neat. So that'd be something like right now it's just a perfect flat cone or whatever. I'm going to go into the link generator and we're going to make this a little bit more interesting right here. I'm going to grab a histogram scan of just the top. So very low value. So it's just the whitest part of the original shape. And I'm going to make a norm map in here just so we can see this for a second. So you can see what I mean. So I'm going to view this in our normal output. Not on the cloth is probably, in this case, not super helpful. So put it on the cube. Make this norm map really strong. This is just so we can see what we're doing in here. But I'm going to take this and basically just subtract it from the original shape to get that little dip. Now this is like really thin. If we want a bit more of a lip on this, we could bevel this inward and I'd bevel it at full intensity, right? So I just set it to -1 and then I'll auto level it like this, and then histogram scan this. And this will just allow us to get, you could probably also set the bevel type to angular. Adds a bit more noise, so you probably have to smooth it a bit. But when we scan this now, we add a little bit of an inset to this. So you can see, I'm going to hold shift and drag these over just to redirect them. But you can see we create this little like rim, which will add, I think, like a much needed detail there. It's probably a little too intense too. It's probably too thick. And the angular might actually be hurting us a bit more. He's just adding too much noise. Yeah, that's totally fine. And we could probably push this out a bit. I don't know why it's doing that, but yeah, I'm just interested in having this little slope here, essentially. And then the bolt is maybe a little too big now. I think it's getting in the way. So I'll just go down to the bolt and scale it down a little bit. Then we'll hop back into the main graph. I also want to flatten this a bit. Like I said, later on post-game, I'm going to make this look more like a bead. Like a soldered bead. But for now, I just want to kind of flatten the top a bit. So I'm just going to histogram scan that. Just to get that little, like the button at least for now. Then I'm going to hop back into the main graph. And let's actually do some texturing in here. So switching this back to the cloth. That adds a lot, right? Having that little dip there. I think it's probably a little too intense. We can make a control for that if we want. So I'm going to go into the link generator. In this subtract blending mode, I'm going to expose it and call it, what would I even call this? Inset depth. And so now we can't control this here, but if we go into our main graph, we click on these, we can change them here. Now we'd have to link them all together. So I'm going to grab this, expose this, and we'll put this in a group called links, just so we know that they're all the same thing. And I'm going to link all these. So go to all their inset depths and connect them. And that way we'll be able to actually go control these all at the same time. Just so we can tune this in the main graph. It's always nice to be able to just expose these things on your little subgraphs and then come in here and adjust them all together at once. Because I just think it's the inset is too deep. So we'll go to our inset depth and turn this down a bit, and they all should shrink. Or not cut in as deep, I guess. It'll be kind of subtle. But I do think it adds a lot. Even just having that little extra wrinkle makes a big difference. We did that same thing where the height is just a little too intense. So we're going to turn the up on our, I just went to material edit. I'm not using the path tracer right now. We'll use it at the end, I think. And we'll just turn the scale down a little. That feels good. Nice. So yeah, let's get to texturing for now. The nice thing is we're going to have all sorts of flood fills to use because the shape splatter comes with UVs for each link, which will be very helpful for scattering our texture around. But for now, let's start. I'm usually tempted to start with roughness on things like this. So why don't we do that first? With metals, it's often the case that I like to start with roughness and then pull stuff into albedo, which is kind of the way I roll. But for now, I'm going to make the metal a bit darker. If this metal is this old, it can be quite dark. Metals are generally bright, so you don't want to get super dark for the most part. But I like the look of the metal not being particularly smooth. I don't think it should be. Right, so that roughness value, we're not getting very shiny. This is like old beat up metal. So it's a lot more matte. But let's work on roughness. And then, you know what? Let's do albedo first, just because it'll show up the flood fill better. Let's do a couple of things here. So the obvious thing we want to do is this rust. That's like the big, most obvious thing. So if you were to take a moisture noise and let's just make a quick rust color. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to pick colors off of this. So over here, I'm just going to make a uniform color and pick some kind of stable rust value and blend this over top. We are going to make this much better by the end of the day, but it's always nice to start with flat colors. So I'm going to plug this in. Sorry, my dog might bark here. She's detecting another dog. Put this over. Now, this sort of works, and well, it's not that it sort of works. The issue is that we have rust just absolutely everywhere. And if you look at this, maybe if you're looking at the big thing of chainmail, you see some areas that are more rusty than others, and we can do that too. But the rust doesn't necessarily continue from one link to the next. Right? It's not like all four of these are super, super rusty and all three of these aren't, which is what we have now. We want the rust to be more specific to each link. So I'm going to do a couple things here first. I'm going to scan this just so we have it be really on or off. just so we can see it. It's not, we want it to like really just show up, either be there or not be there. And I want to go to high pass grayscale here. High pass grayscale is really great for controlling the frequency of detail, especially with an auto level after it, because this will help you control the frequency of the noise. And the lower the number, the more frequent the noise. So here's the real trick we start getting into. We want to take, we need FloodFills essentially so that we can scatter around this noise so it doesn't like carry over from one piece to the next, basically. I'm also going to make this a lot more saturated and probably less brown, like make it a bit more red for now. So what we can do here, which is a fun trick, is we have these FloodFills. The only problem is we need to combine them, because right now we only have the FloodFills, because we would like to go FloodFill to random grayscale, sure. But we don't have both rings, right? We only have the rings that are tilted up. We don't have the up and down rings, which is a problem. So what we'll do instead is take our, we have to blend these together essentially. So we need to take the splatter data from the first one and the splatter data from the second one and blend them over each other. The way we're going to do this is where we're blending them on the two versions onto each other with the lighten blend mode here. I'm going to take a blend node. Also, we're in 32-bit floating point here, so we should probably hop out of that. So I'm going to set this transform node to 16 bits. And I'm going to make another transform node here for a minute. We don't, these nodes are 32-bit floating point, and we just don't really need the bit depth. We're not doing anything fancy with it that would require them. So I'm just stepping these back down to 16. It'll save you some computation for the rest of the graph. But I'm going to get a mask of where these intersect. So I'm going to take the completed blend and take one of the nodes that happened before it and subtract it, and then histogram scan it. And what this does is just give you a mask of the intersections, essentially. Like if you were to put this into albedo, you'll see that this just is only showing the bottom rings. Right? We have a mask of where they intersect. This type of thing is really useful. And we can use this as our mask to blend between the two different parts of the FloodFill. Now, this won't work just because the FloodFills have an alpha channel in them. Right? So they have a red channel, green channel, blue channel, alpha channel. And since there's alpha channels involved in these, it doesn't really know how to use the alpha here correctly. So I'm going to set this to ignore the alpha and just blend them over top. These are blended incorrectly. So there we go. That's fine. Get this. Great. Just want to make sure that these blend well. Oh, it's because we need to move this one. They're not lining up because we actually moved this guy here, but we haven't moved the FloodFill. So we need to duplicate this transform and move him as well. And now they line up. I was wondering why they weren't looking right. So this is fine. The only problem is this won't work for FloodFills if we go to FloodFill to random grayscale or something, just because it's missing the alpha channel because we're ignoring it. So we need to make a separate blend for just the alpha channels of these. So I'm going to grab an alpha split and pull out the alpha channels of both of our splatter data here. Like this. And then do the exact same blend with just the alpha channels. And then back here, do the reverse, do an alpha merge. There's the RGB values, here's the alpha values. And now this will work for FloodFills. So we can use this in all of our texturing escapades, just like you would a FloodFill. The only problem is we have a bit of noise here. This is just because when we transform this, there's some aliasing. So you can just go down to the bitmap mode, set it to manual 0, and go to your filtering and set it to nearest, and we won't have that filtering problem. and that will allow the flood fill to work properly. So we're likely going to use this flood fill all over the graph. So I'm going to make a portal node here, right? So you click here and press Alt, and I'm going to name this flood fill links. And the reason we want to do that is because elsewhere in the graph, we can place another dot node, select this, and this allows us to use our flood fill without having to have things just stretching all over the graph and being really unwieldy. So I'm going to put these here. Same thing with our final height map here. We could just make a dot node and call this like final height or height final. I'd like to do the order in a way that makes sense there. And then we don't need to have this stretching everywhere. I can just call this height final, redirect these. So they're just these portal nodes, basically like little radio named reroutes. So you don't have to have stuff just stretching all over the graph and making it really messy. So we're getting back to our Rust here. We want to spread this Rust texture apart. So a really helpful thing here is to use a flood fill to random color. We need to distance this because we want to close all this black space up. So for that, we need the mask of the flood fill, which is essentially it's the height map histogram scanned. So if we do this and histogram scan this and get a distance node, if you've seen anything I've done in any tutorial, Patreon or otherwise, this is something you see me do all the time. Just grab our flood fills and spread them out. So we probably don't need it to be full. There you go. So this just makes sure we close all the gap between all of our flood fills up. But the nice thing about using a flood fill to random color here is we can take our Rust, now we got to improve this a lot, but we can take our Rust texture and rip it apart so it's different for every link. And to do that, we're going to get a vector warp grayscale and plug our random color values into this. And this breaks it apart for every link. So it's a lot of work to do that. And it's a subtle thing, but it's one of those things that will really make a big difference at the end of the day. It creates a lot of value here by having it be so like this Rust doesn't necessarily carry on to the thing beneath it, right? Like we have something like this, for example, which on the other way we could never do. Because this, if there's Rust here, it'll be on the bottom one as well. Because we're just laying a thing of Rust over top of it. If we do it the old way, right? If there's Rust here on the top ring, it'll also be on the bottom ring. But once we rip it apart, they don't necessarily. So the rings have a bit more individual characteristics to them, which is nice. So I think that's a good kind of starting point there. What we probably want to do is do a material blend of this, because the Rust is almost a different material. Not almost, it is. So I'm going to use a material blend. And right now we're only really affecting base color. We aren't going to affect normal or specular. We're not using it. Neither are we using glossiness. But roughness, metallic, and albedo are really what we're worried about here. So we could consider this the albedo 1, which is our metal. And our roughness value we have over here, I believe. Oh, we don't even have it plugged in, do we? Right there. And we know it is metal as well. So we'll take our metal and plug this in. And the reason I'm doing this is just because it's easier for me to think about it. Instead of chasing my tail around everywhere, like trying to pull stuff from roughness and into like having all these noodles everywhere, I'd rather think about it as like the metal is sort of a different thing from the Rust, and we can blend them in together. So I'm going to take Rust. That's our Rust base color. Our Rust should definitely get a lot rougher, like a lot, because it's extremely coarse. I never want to get full white, really, if I can avoid it. And then it shouldn't be metal, because it's just not. It's Rust. I'm going to press D to dock these for now. And instead of doing this, I'll reroute this to our base color. And, well, I'll undock them just so we can see. This is basically our Rust base color values that we're going to use for all our different channels and our metal. And we can now use our rust mask inside the mask of the blend, and we can do all of them at once. So we can change our roughness and change our metal. Where's our metal output? Like this. Gives us a bit more flexibility. It's a lot easier to use. And now what we can do is, this is something you always want to think about when you're doing, well, this is what I like to think about, at least in my view. I like to have material 1, which is the metal, material 2, which is the rust, and then a mask, and that's it. Really, most things you're going to do are those 3 things. Thing A, thing B, and then the mask that blends between them. And that's kind of all you need. So take this here. We have our AO. We'll deal with the AO stuff later, but that's fine for now. So we can tell, we probably want the rust to be a bit darker. I actually kind of want the base metal to be a bit darker too. Not that dark, something like this. Okay. And the rust can probably get a bit more saturated, a bit darker. I'm just looking off to the rust albedo. We're gonna need a lot more detail on this too. It also kind of ends on a dime, so we can go here and turn the contrast up a bunch. We're going to add a lot more noise to this too. Like this mask is going to get a lot more complicated. So I'm going to take a blend node here and like lay in some black and white spots just to really break this up a bit more. Make it a bit more interesting. That's cool. And the flat color isn't going to be, this already looks kind of neat, but we don't want just that flat color. So what I'm going to do is take the brown color of our rust and add some detail to it. So let's just grab a black and white noise again up here, because it's just sort of like speckly different values. The first thing you could do is literally just take one of these and do an add sub, just to make some areas of the rust darker, some areas brighter. Like that already will make it a bit more interesting. We can also change the color around, which we absolutely should do. So I'm going to take another black and white noise and get a different version of it and use this to blend in some other colors. So I'm going to make a version of our rust that's a bit brighter, a bit more saturated, and a bit less red, like a bit more yellow. And use this black and white noise to blend it in. Right, so we just get a different tone in. I'm going to move the color of this a bit more by grabbing this levels and taking a bit of red out. We're starting to just get some different kind of albedo values going in here, which feels a lot nicer. Like that feels pretty good. Just getting some more, I'm just looking for different tones in here, essentially. I think this can get broken up even more. I'm going to scale up the black and white noise a bit. Yeah, I'm looking for just like, the problem I was feeling, right, is that the noises were all kind of similar sizes, like each splat. But if I do this, it's a bit more broken up, which I like better. I also might histogram scan this a bit more. What you could do is a non-uniform histogram, or a non-uniform blur even. Like this. And I'm going to make these end on like a dime almost. So put the contrast to full. So now it's really, I should kind of like it without the non-uniform blur maybe. I think this is really cool. A lot of this part is just kind of playing around. But that seems fine to me. I might add this non-uniform blur. So this allows me to blur certain parts while others don't. And I'm going to take just a noise we have from earlier, like even this thing, blur this a bit and take the noise and just rotate it a little, just so it's a little bit different from the noise that came before it, and plug that into the blur map. And what you'll see is where we have white in the blur map, we blur our noise a lot more than we do in the parts where we don't. So this just allows me to break it up a little bit, so it's not the exact same intensity. The blur isn't the same like characteristic everywhere on the texture. So we get some areas where it's a bit of a softer. You can see the difference here. It's in version 1, it's all really, really sharp. In version 2, like we are blurring some of it in certain areas to just have a bit of a different vibe. And there's a lot more you could add here, but this seems fine for now. I do want the rust to have a bit more of this. Some of the rust comes from the actual pitting on the metal too. Like the metal clearly has some wear and tear on it. So what we could do is actually beat up the metal a little bit. And again, in the post game, we'll add a lot more of this type of thing to really kind of look dev that material. But what I'm going to do here is at least get initial kind of breakup on this. Even honestly, like a moisture noise, and just subtract this or even multiply it just to get a bit of breakup. And auto level this just so we have our full histogram scan. That gives us a bit of like movement on the actual metal itself. You can see here, it's not like perfectly just came out of, it's like not IKEA chainmail, basically like this, where it's perfectly straight. Like we want to get a little bit of movement on it, schmovement. Right, so it's not so perfect. I also think my metal has gotten a little dark. I also might cheat a little bit here, and this is just kind of my style more than anything. I want to add a little bit of a tint to the underlying metal. I'm just going to grab like a bluish tint just to create a kind of a contrast with the rust. You can be subtle with this. I just want a bit of a difference there. So I think that's decent. The other thing is the rust. Presumably the rust will also show up in the grunge a bit more. So we can add AO into our rust texture here. So if we grab a dot of our final height and make a AO node, what's nice is because we have some stuff beat up in the height map now, it'll also contribute to this. And I'm going to spread this out a little bit less. And I'm going to invert this. And literally we'll just try just adding this to our mask here. And this will help put some rust where the links meet, which will help ground it a bit more. We also get nice little dots of rust in the height map that could, because we modulated the height map a bit and had it like dip and rise up a little bit in different areas, it does create some areas for our AO to grab onto, which is kind of nice. So we can do this. And the add is probably a little intense. We could like screen it. We might even want to like add sub this potentially, but invert these. You know what? No, let's actually just add it, but just put on a bit of a less intensity. And I might even histogram scan this so we don't have it so kind of diffused. I want it to be in real kind of tight areas here along the height map. Like this. Cool. And we can break this up even, we can like break up the AO too if we want. They grab a moisture noise. Subtract this from our AO first, just to break it up a little, auto level it. And this just helps break up the thing we just added. A lot of what you're doing in Designer is that, is taking things, adding them in, creating breakup for it. But this is a good job of creating that kind of contact rust where things touch. Yeah, I think that's working pretty well, actually. Yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. Looking at our reference. There's more to add for sure. We should, like, obviously we want to add a lot more like fine detail to the metal. That'll all be post-game stuff. But this is probably a good starting point. I'm just going to also go in and do some roughness adjustments and make the albedo of everything just a little bit more interesting. Like, this is fine for the rest for now, but eventually you'll want to add a lot more stuff. Like, I would want to get, I like the black and white noise too, just because it's a good balance of high frequency details. Scale this up. I'm going to get like a normal, like make this into a normal map. Make a curvature. Probably don't need to zoom it out that much actually. The nice thing about this is if you get a curvature smooth, you can make really high frequency noises this way. I'm going to histogram scan this. Auto level it. And I'm just going to add some like really speckly, let's get some like super red chunks. I'm just looking at the reference and seeing these kind of different tones of rust. And I'm going to scan this so it's a bit more speckly. So we just get we get these like really red specks every once in a while. So just you can see it makes a difference here, just like adding in these color tonal variations. Essentially, we're trying to get a bit more variety. Like this is nice where we have it like kind of interacting here in this interesting way. I really want to throw in the path tracer later. The rust might also be a little bit too everywhere, in which case we can go to our original rust generation here and turn the high pass grayscale up a bit. So it's a bit more spread out. We have bigger islands of rust instead of it being little tiny discrete ones. We have a lot of stuff we could like tweak here, and we will do that in the post game. But this is fine for now. I'm going to just make some basic roughness for the metal. This is something where in the Patreon video, we're going to go through and do some really fun stuff with Cartesian coordinates to have the metal like follow each ring. But for now, I'm not so worried about it. So let's just make a bit more of an interesting base quality for our metal, because we just don't have anything. So I'm just going to take our metal, because right now our roughness has a lot of detail in the rust, although not much. It doesn't really. Let's do something I tell people not to do. But I'm going to take our albedo and convert it to grayscale information for a minute. And just so I'm not being totally unfaithful to myself, I suppose, I'm going to use a histogram shift, and this just moves the histogram around a bunch. I think that's fine. It won't work super well though. What will work though is using a gradient dynamic. I'm just trying to scramble this a bit basically. So a gradient dynamic with this as the input and the gradient should scramble it. Later on, we can use this to add more detail into the albedo as well. But here's our rust roughness. So this just adds a bit more detail. The rust actually has some like characteristics to it. It's not just like a white, flat roughness. It's probably a little too smooth because we're getting some areas that are a little shiny. So you could put a histogram range here. The range is really, really good for tuning roughness values, because we can control very easily in one area how much range is there in the roughness, and is it overall bright or dark? And the rust should be quite bright. But having some smoother areas is nice just to get a bit of variety. Nothing wrong with that. We're just going to do the same thing quickly for the metal here. So I'm just going to make some generic roughness breakup. Let's get like a moisture noise. Scale this up. Blend this in on like an add sub and low intensity. Get some higher frequency noise for the roughness as well. So same thing, get like a black and white 3 maybe. And sharpen this just to get some real kind of speckly detail. And I'm going to add sub this as well. And this can be just like a basic version of our metal roughness. So again, I like to auto level my roughnesses generally and then use a histogram range. And this will be the roughness for our actual metal. And this adds quite a bit. So instead of just having that even sheen on the metal, we have a bit more breakup, which is always more interesting. It could be a bit darker if we want it to be smoother. We could have more variety in it. But I like having the contrast between the smoother metal and the rougher rust. I think that is like worth it. And then same thing with the metal itself. We would want some sort of breakup here. Again, we don't have, I want to keep this video hopefully under an hour. We're getting close. So I want to just kind of speed through this part and add a little bit of breakup here. Love the moisture noise. See this because we just used this one a couple times now. Add sub this. Put this over top. Like that, that's fine. Just to get some variety in the base color as well. The other thing you could do is throw like even just quickly like a metal edge wear or something on top of our albedo here. So we just give it a shot. So we need our height map and stuff. That's our metal values. We can dock those. I'm just pressing D to dock those because they're just the metal values. They'll never change. And we'll organize this a second as well. These here. That's in a pretty good spot. We also look at it on something else. We haven't seen it on anything else. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Not bad for a quick just kind of hour setting stuff up. So go over here. I'm going to take we need our curvature and position and stuff. So I need to get our dot, grab our final height, make a normal map, all that good stuff. Grab a curvature. I like the curvature Sobel and stuff. Like since we're making something that's quite noisy, I don't mind using the original curvature. We can use this just to make some quick kind of cheap edge wear here. We probably want the grunge scale up a bunch. And I'm just going to add this on because like maybe this is like where the metal has been scuffed and chipped and we are seeing newer metal underneath. So it gets a bit brighter. And so the metal is just kind of being revealed where it's getting chipped, like where it's raised and a sword's clanging off of it or whatever. You can turn the wear contrast up a bit. Edge smoothness down. One day we'll, like, on the Patreon we do a video where we're making a custom node for edge damage, but we'll go through at some point making a custom metal edge wear like this or something at some point. But this is a good just kind of starting point. It'd probably affect the roughness too, because in those areas where there's new metal, it should get darker in the roughness because it's getting shinier. Because we're unveiling newer metal that hasn't been kind of hit with mud and dirt and all that stuff. You see the difference here, just popping it a little. And I think this is basically a good spot to leave it for now. Like I'm just gonna make some quick frames here because I'll put a link to this in the description if people want to download it and follow along. So there's our rust stuff. Here's our metal. And this is pretty indicative of just like how I would approach working on a material I don't really know how to build yet, where it's just getting all the basics in like this. And then it becomes about just polishing everything. So this is our metal. Is it? No, this is our rust mask. A lot of designer is just getting in kind of the bare bones stuff and then going through and doing all of your polish work after. So this is the link height map. And over here is the actual kind of like chainmail itself. So we'll call this like chainmail pattern or something. And it is worth going through your graphs. I see people in the Discord posting just like psychotic graphs with just noodles everywhere, which is makes a lot of sense when you're learning. That's like very, very common. But I think for everyone, you could benefit from just taking a second, like I've just done here every once in a while, to just go through and organize Marie Kondo mode, just like go through and organize this stuff a bit more. It just makes your life easier in the long run. But I think this is a pretty good spot to leave it for now. Like I said, it's just like basically where I'm at, where I'm just starting stuff, and then I have to go and actually make it good, or at least try to make it good. But the last thing I want to do is put this on the cloth again and turn on that new path tracer. My brain is still breaking about the hotkey for rotating the environment map. But turn on, let's see the GPU path tracer. Hopefully this doesn't totally bork my audio. But getting that self shadow is really, really nice. So I go here, I'm going to turn my scale up. Again, big thanks to Louise for her really great video going over all the new features. It's really nice it's a really nice thing to have whenever big new things like the spline nodes come out, to have her walk through and, you know, give people a really nice kind of introduction to everything is really helpful. But this is slick. This looks really nice. It's cool being able to have the actual self-shadowing from the displaced mesh. Just look at it. Big. Cool, yeah, so we'll leave it there. That kind of base mode. And just this, you know, I think we're just about an hour. So that's pretty good for just getting the base going, I think. So that gets into a pretty good spot here. Like I said, a way I like to think about materials, because they often feel daunting or complex. Like for me, the easiest thing to do is just get everything in some basic form, right? So we got through and just got simple rust, simple metal, just everything in the bucket so we can talk about it. And then we can spend our time identifying things we'd like to improve and then figuring out how we're going to do that. So for instance, I know we talked in the video about how I'm not crazy about these little bolts, and in the reference are a bit more of like a little kind of metal, like soldered piece where they must have been attached to each other. And the materials themselves are just kind of basic. So in the post graph, which is available at the Patreon, the link is in the description, we're going to go through and make those improvements. So a number of those is actually just improving the quality of the height maps, the albedo maps, the roughness channels, just all of our different texture channels, and just making them better, adding new details, things like that. Particularly, we're going to do stuff around the rings to make those bolts better, to create that kind of like soldered look. It's just taking a second to load here. As well, the most important thing we do in the graph in the post game is go through and actually get noises that we need to flex and rotate around the chainmail to actually have it follow the path of it. So in the YouTube video, we have our FloodFills, which are just UV coordinates, but we're going to use this pixel processor to take those UV coordinates and convert them from Cartesian to polar, and then offset them randomly so that we get different noise in each piece. And we're able to take noises and wrap them to the surfaces of the rings. So see when they update here, we go through this really, I think it's a really effective process of having this detail wrapped to the actual surfaces of the rings with their own UVs, which is really cool. Right, so there's a lot of just like general polish in here of making the materials from a texture standpoint better, but also going through and talking through these sort of like advanced features, talking about how to make these more interesting little details that we didn't do in the YouTube video. So if you're interested in that, you can head over to the Patreon. It's in the description. And if not, you're happy to hang out here and you've got all you need of it. I appreciate that. I hope you learned something. If you like the video, please like the video. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I can be trying to make more of these sort of one-shot materials where we just go through them all in one day. So I would love to see recommendations in the comments about things people would like to see, because I'm always surprised by the stuff people actually want. I've had people ask for chainmail a lot, which I would have thought would not have been interesting. So if you have an idea for something you'd like to have in the future, please put it in the comments, and I definitely do read them, and it helps me guide me, I guess, into what I'd like to do next. So this is fun. Like this one. If you'd like to hit up the post graph to go check out the extra stuff, the Patreon link is again in the description. And other than that, thanks for hanging out. We'll see you guys in the next one.